Welcome to the future of working and learning. Today's education is disrupted. It requires upskilling, reskilling, focusing on growth, creativity, and innovation. As the current health crisis has tested our education system, and the world is constantly evolving through technology, AI, automation. We are reshaping the future of work and learning. Right now, according to the World Economic Forum, expects more than half the global workforce will need significant training and development over the next 5 years. Doing this requires different approaches to work and learning, both in formal education, but also throughout our professional careers. In today's Space for Women show, Series 25, we'll be exploring the changing trajectories across the future of working, learning, skills, and tailor learning, sharing views with some bright minds to help us better understand how to cultivate a culture of learning, lifelong learning, and how to keep pace with the ever-evolving nature of work. So please welcome our space friends today, Bea Lian. She is the founder of the Hungry Lab, and Dr. Simon Paternestre. He's first and foremost my SSP 19 alumni friend and a space engineer at ESA Aztec for Vitro-Seat Belgium. And today's Space for Women, UNOSA Space for Women mentor is Ms. Zainab Azim. We will discuss questions such as, how do we develop a new frontier for the workforce of tomorrow? How could the framework for the future of work and learning look like? And what challenges are we seeing in education and the working sector in both developed and developing nations? Lastly, how do we design for agility and focusing on impact? And what role do space developments and research have in solving these problems and moving the education working world forward, both in developed and developing nations? So I would like to open the floor for Bea, our first speaker.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Bea Lee. I go by Bea, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Hungry Lab. And I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Space has been both a personal, it has been a very personal, a dear subject for myself ever since I was a little kid. And I became really transfixed with Carl Sagan and Isaac Asimov. And today, I'm so happy to share with everyone why space is going to be a very critical subject for us to be able to adapt and learn these future skills that Han was talking about in terms of the future of work and learning. So let me just share with you my screen. And I'm going to share with you just a very high level overview of the future landscape, what we have to look forward to, what's happening, and how we can actually adapt and future-proof ourselves. So I am a futurist, I am an entrepreneur, and I'm an educationist. And so combining all of these, I'm helping universities, startups, companies, governments, NGOs, as well as individual people shape and craft and future-proof their journey in the face of so many global challenges. And so I'll be sharing a little bit more about how we do that. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. One thing that is very important for us to understand is that learning, and I use learning as separate from education and separate from schooling. And those are very key terms that we need to distinguish. Right now, one of the things that have gotten us into trouble with education is that we use education and schooling at the same thing. And schooling is one type of structure, right? Education is all around us. And that is the mindset with which we need to go forth in the future, that exploration, education is all around us, And we need to embrace learning more. And so this is what I call the next industrial revolution to the next cognitive revolution. We've all heard of Industry 4.0. We've heard of the fourth industrial revolution. How do we prepare people for that? There are all these technical skills, AI, machine learning. You've heard all of these buzzwords. But what does that mean when we have so many people who are ill-equipped to understand these skills and ill-equipped to with the skills needed to succeed in this industrial revolution? We hear from corporates all the time that the workforce is unprepared, that the students graduating from schools are unprepared. And so we need to, if you look at the tip of the iceberg, the industrial revolution is only the top. We need to, in order to prepare people to thrive in the industrial revolution, we need to help them learn how to learn these skills. And that requires the next cognitive revolution. And to be able to open your mind to acquire these new skills, which is a new way of learning, you need to open up your entire being, which is what we call the next existential revolution. And so these are the macro trends that are going to be happening in terms of shifts in society. That is going to be really exciting. I like to quote Alvin Toffler when he says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And as we've seen with this pandemic, people have the digital transformation of the workforce, of the school system has accelerated. And there needs to be new modes and modalities of how people learn offline, virtually, and in isolation during lockdown, and all of these other things that previously were not in consideration. And so I'm going to be talking about why space is helpful in this regards, the map for the future, and what are the next gen STEM skills. We all hear STEM and how space is an important part of the STEM curriculum. And what does the next generation of STEM skills look like? And what are the future-proof skills that especially young people need to help them thrive in the future? Right? And so everything starts with a mindset, right? Where our head goes, everything else goes. And the future is all about having a growth mindset, because the future is all about growth in many different aspects. And our mindsets must be regenerative. And I'm going to be talking about this term regenerative and how that differs from resiliency. Everyone talks about, oh, we need to build resilience. We need to make our children resilient, the system resilient, everything is resilient. The thing is, as we've seen, COVID has laid bare so many structural inequalities, injustices, a lot of really big, deep-seated problems with our economic system, a lot of that stuff, our schooling system. So resilience, I say, is no longer enough. Resilience is about being able to get up after you take those punches, but it has an implicit acceptance of the status quo. The status quo, the current state, is what gotten us into trouble in the first place. So we need to move beyond seeing how we can fit into the existing system and be regenerative and create a new system. And that requires training our minds to think differently, to learn differently, right? And so one of the key things, if you look at the larger economic data and you look at some of the most innovative economies in the world, what do they have in common, right? You look at the investment in education at a tertiary level, the university level, in terms of R&D, what the universities are producing. You look at the amount of innovation coming out with patents. You look at the amount of new manufacturing. You look at productivity, and you look at a lot of those, a lot of the R&D metrics to see how our economy is performing, right? And the whole exploration, this R&D, this new types of innovation are going to be critical, because 65% of children entering primary school today will end up in jobs that don't yet exist, right? So how do you actually educate and school and train children for jobs that don't even exist, right? That means that we have to train them to learn how to create and get those jobs that don't exist, meaning we have to train whole new skill sets of how to create opportunities for themselves, right? That's the future, and it's already here, right? And so one thing that I love about space is that it's a constant process of exploration, of asking the right questions. And sometimes we try to worry so much about finding the answers that we forget, are we even asking the right questions? And that's a key part of this future of learning, and how to successfully learn is to understand and be able to assess and ask the right question and get out of your comfort zone. And that's what I love about space education and space exploration. It helps people get out of their comfort zone, right? And if you're not, science has proven that if you're not growing, you're not learning, right? And we are going to require every single person to get out of their comfort zone. Most people don't like that, right? Human beings we're lazy by nature, right? We like things comfortable, we like things structured, we want things, easy. And, but that is how we get complacent. That's why so many people get surprised when they get laid off, because they haven't updated their skills, right? And to continue to learn, that learning to learn and having the intellectual curiosity and love of learning for life, that's another mindset. That's another future-proof mindset, another skill set that is going to be critical in the future. Okay. Here's another very interesting thing. Ken alluded to this concept of creativity. So NASA actually did the study with 1,600 children, and from the ages of 4 to 5, 98% of those children tested as creative geniuses. So basically all children are creative geniuses, right? But then when they track these children into adulthood, and by the time they got into adulthood, the same 98% of children who tested as creative geniuses, as adults, only 2% tested as creative geniuses. So what does that actually mean? It means that we're born with all these creative genius gifts, and somehow along the line, society, schooling, everything makes us dumb, right? It knocks the genius out of us. And so imagine if we can go harness that now. I always say that I've been saying it for years, and I say this in every presentation that I do around the world, that the greatest tragedy is wasted human potential. And imagine the amount of solutions, the amount of progress, the amount preventing a lot of man-made problems if we allowed everyone to step into their full potential, harness and unleash their true genius, right? Rather than stifling or suppressing it. And there's going to require different types of thinking for nurturing creative genius, right? It requires new models of learning and teaching, because we work with universities and colleges around the world because we get a lot of requests that the teachers and professors don't know how to teach this because it's so new, right? And so it requires divergent thinking, imagination, right? As Einstein would say, imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge takes you from point A to point B. Imagination takes you everywhere. And I think as anybody who has looked up in the stars and studied space, imagination is critical, right? When you think of all the possibilities out there. And to create convergent thinking, right? How do we synthesize that information? And how do we apply it to our current needs, right? How do we take all of these amazing exponential technologies, for example, and harness them like space tech to solve and improve the human condition here with related to the UN Sustainable Development Goals? We do a lot of that work in our think tank, and looking at how do we apply all of these technologies, space technologies, emerging technologies, and apply them to innovative solutions so we can help in agriculture, in food security, in financial inclusion of the most marginalized populations, right? And how do we create new neural pathways? Because that's how you actually stimulate learning for life, through brain training, right? And space exploration and skills help build this growth mindset of learning. So that's very, very important. And the future requires problem solvers, not blind followers, right? It doesn't require anybody to memorize a chapter from a book or copy whatever the teacher wrote on the board, right? That's the old way of learning. What we learn is going to change so rapidly now because technology is changing so fast. Everything is changing so fast that what you learn might not be relevant or current the next year. So you have to learn how to learn so you can quickly adjust and learn something new. right? And space helps teach us how to problem solve, right? It helps teach us a lot of these critical skills that enable us to develop this new framework of learning. And as you can see how all of these things, right, these headlines in the news are amplifying the need for a new model because of all of these pressing global challenges, right? Things why the sustainable development goals are so important. And we do a lot of work with organizations around the world, breaking down those silos and getting all those stakeholders together to create win-win-win solutions to problem solve real pressing challenges, right? With the right processes, incentivizations, frameworks, and cooperation and collaboration and partnerships to be able to affect change on the ground, right? And I like this other quote from Albert Einstein. You know, he said, the important thing is to not stop questioning. That's one of the very common themes throughout this future, right? Asking the right questions, curiosity, never stop questioning, right? And that is what helps hone our powers of observation, helps hone our powers of objective pattern building, right? And pattern building and systems navigation through understanding patterns and seeing the interconnectedness and relationships of everything is another critical skill for the future, understanding systems. And space actually allows us to do that, right? It starts with questioning, it starts with imagination, and it starts with looking at how we can put all of these various pieces together, whether you're an engineer, whether you are an astronomer. And so one of those key skills is to not stop questioning. And what we do is, how do you translate all of these concepts, right? And actually affect change and implement things to individual human beings on the ground, right? And this is what we use in the Hungry Lab with our various incubator programs, our online school, our, you know, all of our various education modalities and programs, is to unleash the ikigai, the reason for being, for every organization, every startup, every individual, to align doing, right, which is the future of work, knowing, which is the future of learning, and being, which is the future of life itself, right? And through that, it's not what to learn, it's how to learn. In order to do that, we need to unleash everybody's unique way of learning for what they're interested in, their passions, their purpose, how they can make a profit, and that process to get them there. Because we can't depend on there to be enough jobs in the world, right? We can't expect the government to be there to help everybody. Everybody now, as we face more competition for jobs, more competition, we need to go from that mindset to help people create their own opportunities. That's the only sustainable way forward, right? And so what is the future-proof mindset? You have to be curious, as we talked about. You have to go from competition to collaboration. We have to be able to change, ready to change, want to change, right? There's that old saying, to change the world, you have to change yourself. And a lot of people, human nature by default is resistant to change. You have to be connected, right? Understand how everything is connected. You have to be connected with all of the various elements of yourself to be a holistic, integrated human being. And you have to be connected with what's going on in the world around us, which requires you to be current on the news, current on the skills, and current on how you are learning, okay? And why is it important? It empowers us. It allows us to adapt to this rapidly volatile future, right? This generation, they say, is the science studies show that this next upcoming generation is the most stressed and most anxious of all the generations before, because look at all the challenges they're facing. You know, look at all the, you know, social media stressors, all of these other things that didn't exist in prior generations. And how do you actually transform yourself and transform that journey to adapt in life, right? And the future of learning, as the World Economic Forum says, is going to be so important. By 2022, everyone will need an extra 101 days of learning, okay? And the future of learning is not just what to learn, as I said, it's how to learn. How do we learn about learning? right? Especially to help the educators and trainers. How do we think about thinking to help our brains overcome themselves, because our brains are trained in certain subconscious patterns that limit us to fully unleash our potential? And how do we leverage our brains to help us become our best selves? And how do we teach about teaching, right? And how do we actually change the structural incentivization for teachers? Because one thing that is common across all countries in the world is that curriculum is hard to change, and that a lot of teachers, even though they want to do innovative things and stuff, they are not incentivized properly. They have a strict curriculum they have to abide to that may not be aligned with what's in best needs for the student's future. And so there are all these structural issues that need to be played, right? And Carl Sagan, one of my lifelong idols and heroes, he says, the cosmos is within us. We are made of star stuff. We are a way for the universe to know itself. And ultimately, that is the long journey and quest of humanity itself. It's for us to know and understand ourselves. That's why we go out to the stars. That's why we go to the moon. That's why we do so many of these amazing things, is for us to push ourselves and push humanity forward, and for us to learn more about ourselves in the process. And that is a fundamental skill in the future that we have to learn, which is learning about ourselves, the self skills. And so when I talk about what are the next gen STEM skills, right? Science, technology, engineering, math is the current STEM skill set. What are the next gen STEM to address the skills gaps of this next generation, right? We talk about it's having the hard skills. The technical skills are not enough. We need to have soft skills. People need to have social skills. They need to have emotional intelligence. That's part of it. But more importantly, and the most fundamental layer of soft skills is what I call meta skills or self skills. Self-awareness, self-regulation, and being able to and self-actualization, right? Those are processes. Those are growth journeys. And everything starts with the self, right? You are the creator of your own destiny. And your reality becomes your set of actions, perceptions, right? And beliefs. And it starts with the self. And how do we improve every single individual, right, to become better versions of themselves? Because we can't afford to leave everybody behind. We can't afford to waste human potential now in the future, because we need everybody on board in light of all of the pressing challenges that we have. And we need technology. We not just what we learn in school, but also those moonshots, the imagination of imagining what can be, and versus saying, oh, this is how we've always done it, right? And entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship doesn't mean that everybody needs to start their own business. Some people don't want that. But it's about imbuing those skills, regardless of whatever you want to do in life, with the critical skills that entrepreneurship teaches, right? Teamwork, problem solving, innovative thinking, creative solutions, right? And then being able to create a sustainable pathway forward by making income, by making an impact in your community, right? And then meaning. Ultimately, it comes down to, right, future industrial revolution, cognitive revolution, and existential revolution. How do we actually make meaning from this, right? When we look to the stars, we explore all of that. We're ultimately searching for ourselves and for this meaning of why we are here, why we're meant to be here. And part of the greatest tragedies of wasted human potential is the fact that, as I mentioned, everyone is born a creative genius. Somehow along the lines, we lose that. And that's why you see in adult society, so many people hurting, right? And hurt people hurt people. That's why if people are unhappy, then you have unhappy cities, you have unhappy societies, right? And you have unhappy countries, and you have hurt people, hurt communities, hurt cities, hurt societies, hurt countries. And we're seeing that play out in a lot of the conflicts around the world. When people have that meaning and they have that purpose, and everyone is happy, right? Then we have virtuous cycles instead of vicious cycles. And ultimately, when we as, for us to truly actualize and experience the human condition in its totality, right? That meaning is going to be even more important. Degrees aren't really going to matter in the future. It's about how you can make meaning with what you're doing and what you love, and how you can make a living, right? Facebook, Google, all of these guys have come out and said that they no longer require college degrees to work for them. Elon Musk has been saying this for a while. He doesn't care anything about degrees, right? And so how do we make money? Through making meaning. That's going to be the future. Okay. And why is this important, right? It's going to affect global education. It's going to affect global livelihood, and it's going to affect global economic development. And so these are all, everything I've talked about have all been part of this arsenal of future skills for working, learning, and being in a global world. And as I talked about earlier, I'm going to show you a map, right? To navigate the future, right? You need a map, and MAP stands for mindset. So we've talked a lot about why mindset is so important and what components comprise a future-proof mindset. We need to understand, how do you apply that mindset? Application is very important. So how do you translate all of these concepts into the real world, into your own unique individual circumstance and situation, so you can take action? And that process to do so. How do we equip everybody with this structure and this process that they can use themselves? Your process might be different than my process, right? How you apply your mindset and how you learn is going to be different than mine. And the future of education needs to accommodate all of this. And so what we do in a lot of our incubation and education programs is to help everyone develop and unleash their own map to navigate whatever future they want to create for themselves, right? And that process requires taking a concept from idea to reality and allowing people that safe space to fail, take risk, right? And create solutions from that. And so 21st century humans need 21st century skills. So all of these skills that I talked about knowing, learning, and being, they can be translated into learning skills, right? What I talked about, problem solving, creativity, collaboration, literacy skills, which are media literacy, technology literacy, right? How current are you on all of those things? And life skills, the meta skills, the self skills that I talked about, right? Leadership, productivity, empathy, right? We can't solve problems and try to save the world if we don't even know or how those people that we're trying to help actually deal with those problems, right? And empathy is very important for being able to problem solve, right? And these are some of the inevitable directions that we're seeing, that we're working with schools and we're working with students and startups to innovate for and prepare for. Like I mentioned, it's about the skills now rather than the school, right? In the future, no one's going to care about your degree for certain things. Obviously, if you're going to be a surgeon, we want you to have the proper qualifications, right? Redefining success and failure, right? And right now we have a structure in which we have a soil and we have the nutrients and the resources for expecting everyone to be an apple seed and grow and bear apples, right? In the real world, we have so many thousands of different types of fruits, right? And so we are working with our partners to create the soil and the right nutrients and resources to nurture various different types of fruits, right? Not just apples. And to have to break down a lot of those artificial barriers and constructs and expectations, right? We have to nurture the whole person, because that's how then you develop that whole skill set, not just one type of skill set, that all of those skill sets that I talked about to nurture creative genius. We need to inculcate experiential problem solving into all learning, right? We face a lot of global challenges. That's why we have a goal, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to try to achieve progress in solving these challenges. With global opportunities, right? And that requires a future-proof mindset and to know your place, right? And so these are just some of the growing skills that we've been teaching, that the World Economic Forum has identified. on what does that mindset look like I talked about, right? And I recommend some of these additional books. I can also provide this as a resource afterwards. I'll provide a link, and then you guys can email me and sign up, and then I can share more free resources for you, okay? And as I say, the future is already here. The future was actually yesterday. We need to play catch up, right? And the good news is, and I'm always optimistic, otherwise, my job becomes very hard when I look at the future without an optimistic lens. It's about embracing uncertainty, right? That's another critical skill set. Looking forward, most human nature naturally does not like the unknown, fears the unknown, right? That's why we have all of these problems with racism, bigotry, all that, because we fear the other, we fear the unknown. We need to embrace the unknown, because that means that even though there are so many challenges facing our world, the unknown also provides us with a clean slate. We no longer have to be defined by the existing structures. So we have more freedom to create and to unleash our genius to solve critical problems in our own way, right? And so that's something that is really important. And I have a video here that I'll share this deck later, and you can do this link. I don't know if we have time to play this video, but you can even go to YouTube yourself and Google it. And it's a very important thing when we talk about perspective. It's Carl Sagan in his famous pale blue dot speech, in which he shares a picture of Earth taken as a tiny little dot from the Voyager spacecraft. And it goes to show that ultimately, beyond borders or countries or race, religion, anything that people have created to separate us from each other on Earth, once you step back and you see that, you understand exactly why you're doing what you're doing, right? Because all of those artificial barriers, conflicts are erased when you look at Earth from space, right? We're just a pale blue dot. And that both, helps amplify the humility and the magnitude of the magnitude of the challenges we face, but also the connectedness of how we are connected to each other and our solutions interact with each other, and how we have to face the future with humility as well, and ask those questions and not pretend we have all those answers. Okay. And so please join us. You can sign up for, like I mentioned, for more free resources, thehungrylab.com/join the re-economy. We're reinventing reinventing the economy to be regenerative. So join the re-economy. And again, if we can remember that the future is how we learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I'm delighted to, to talk with you today and to share some of this. And I look forward to hearing from the other panelists. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for this amazing, insightful presentation through your Hungry Lab. Can I say, stressing out the need for new models through, which I love, the trifecta model, knowing, doing, and being. Yeah. Very holistic approach. You keep stressing, the need for, self-actualization and going inwards to create the world outwards.
Right.
Thank you so much for that. We'll look back to a lot of questions for you later. Our next speaker is a young father of a baby girl. So Simone, he's going to present us learning through tele learning and space, right? The floor is yours, Simone.
Thank you very much, Jen. Very inspiring talk to be. Congratulations, it was really, really interesting. And you highlighted actually what I believe actually it's one of the main points to change. So the first thing is mindset, as you mentioned. So we need to think in a different way. Oh, wait, sorry, I misshare the screen, forgot about it. So we cannot change if we are not the first one willing to change. And then we need something to apply for it. So in my point of view, being a space engineer here in the slide, I'm sure if you can see, you can see my screen. As a basis, I'm an engineer. I've been studying engineering in Italy and then moved to UK for a new challenge, a PhD. And then I'm currently also volunteer for 2 different organizations. One is the Austrian Space Forum, for which I am an analog astronaut. So trying to figure out how we can further explore our solar system and pave the way for the future generation of explorers. And also for the SGAC. So for both, I'm dedicating my free time to try to work a bit on these problems, or what challenges we might face in the future, or how to tackle them. And I also, as Tien mentioned, I'm an alumni from the ISU, so it's where I met Tien, and was really happy. Also, we worked together on the same project, and it was really amazing. And one of the point of our project was to how to solve the problem of urban planning, so the uncontrolled growth of cities that might generate actually more issues than wellness. So as Tien mentioned it, in the last few months, now it's already 6 months, we faced a very threatening pandemic that forced us in a situation that we probably none of us ever faced before, to be confined at home for those that can, and work as much as possible from remote, with the restriction on travel, social distancing, closure of activities, so sometimes even not being allowed to go out within a certain time. So we face a new world in some way, because we completely change our habits because of this pandemic. And all of this put us in front of new possible solution. And one of this exactly is the possibility to people to work from home whenever it's possible. But it's not the only point. We had to face many challenges on how to handle emergencies, on how to support countries or areas in need. And that is in this situation of challenge that, as B said, mentioned, is that the humankind takes out the best of us. So we work on a problem that can be very practical or very creative to solve the challenge that we are facing in a moment. So, but I mean, sometimes what we have some expectation of what we are facing or what we are going to face, and it's just to make fun of the thing that many people might think, okay, teleworking is nice to be, or teleworking on e-learning from home, like for students, like happened for many children in the last months, might be something amazing, something interesting, being home and you're in the comfort of your home and everything. But sometimes expectation and reality are much more different. And here, just a very fun example of what could be the reality. So for not every solution, for many solutions, you might have advantages and disadvantages for these options. In the case of teleworking on studying e-learning from home, the advantage is that has been seen that there is an increased efficiency of the employees, because you are at home, you give your own time, you organize yourself, you don't feel the pressure of your boss or manager. So you have also some flexibility on how to handle your own work, and then gives you it has been proven, and it can increase the efficiency of the employee itself. And then we have another bunch of advantages, like the reduced costs for the employers itself, for the real estate. So working from home saves some costs on the company, and also on the employees themselves, in terms of like commuting. So you don't commute every day, and in big cities, this is a big chunk of the time, and sometimes also cost for a family. And so you save on this, and giving a chance to the also to case to parents to stay more at home with the kids, so to increase a little bit the quality of the life, because then you can spend the more time for yourself as well. It's been proved that you take care more of yourself, going training a bit more than if you go every day in the office. And we have also benefits for the environment. If we commute less, we have less, let's say, big cities cars, so then you pollute less in some way. And all seems nice from this point of view, but there are, like as I said before, most of the solution have also the other side of the medal. And some of them I actually faced myself working from home this last 6 months. In some cases, has been realized that people, they cannot disconnect. They don't see this connection between their private life and the working environment. So they don't see, they see the house and the office at the same time, and it can create some psychological conflicts. You have less human interactions, and we know humans are very social, and in many jobs you need to interact with other people to get information, to discuss, brainstorming, discussing about ideas. So the social aspect, sometimes is very important for jobs itself. Even if when you have to meet the customer, it's differently if you do in person rather than on a video call or a video conference. There is less feelings involved in that, let's say. Yeah, and as I said, there is a decreased exchange, decreased cases or chances to discuss and create something innovative, something new. The other point is that the difficulty of integrating new employees, or even if you want to improve your own, you want to discuss with someone on another position, or how to be trained in a different system or software tools or whatever, depending on your job. So then you need to have the right tools and the right system in place in order to train newcomers or to improve your own skills. And the other side of the medal is that, yes, you're at home, you have also more distraction. It might be that your kids are too much around, or then you're taking care of the house for some reason and you're concerned about it. And the other point is security. Being at home, teleworking, so there is a much more exchange of emails, documents, information, and then security might be one of the issues, because you need to have a secure connection, a secure system in order to have a safe exchange of this information. So this is one of the main concerns for related to teleworking, and more or less the same could be applied if you think about it, the e-learning. So what Space can do for this, and one of this is as we were saying before, one of the problem is the mindset, so change mindsets, but then we need also to apply this mindset with something. And I just came up with probably one of the changes that could come up very soon, actually, and that also be mentioned that we need to be connected in order to find new solution, new ideas. And in a next years, actually, we will probably have a new system that is the satellite internet broadband that could actually connect the whole world. I was reading something the previous day, and I didn't know that less than half of the population of the world has access to let's say, reliable internet connection. Not only developing countries, also developed countries, they have the same issues. There are some areas like of the United States or Canada, Australia, that they are not well covered by internet provider. So then they are disconnected from the rest of the world. And the idea behind these three names that you find below, Starlink, OneWeb, and the Project Kuiper, is exactly to connect the whole world. Imagine if nowadays we have already so many ideas, so many concepts coming up from the people that they can share online. They can find other person that would like to share the same vision or work on it. Imagine if you managed to connect the other half of the world to it. How many more ideas we could gather? How many people from that they don't have actually connection at the moment, they have a solution or idea that they built or design in their garage or backyard, and then they cannot share with the rest of the world because they don't know how to connect with other people and let them know what is possible. So that's why I mentioned it. This is one solution that might come up from one technical solution that infrastructure that can come from space. So provide the infrastructure of for a connection to the whole world. And then the other point is that sharing the knowledge and technologies and experience gained. I make an example of space industry. Space industry, we usually deal with a customer or other suppliers and everything from all over the world. So one way to discuss with them, to interact, is being connected and telework, doing a video conference and so on. So we have experience in this field. We know how to set up all the system and the tools that are needed in order to create this connection and to discuss together about ideas, projects, and also knowledge. Like, for example, ESA has I can go to the next slide, and we have an example. ESA has a dedicated part of the agency that is working on the education. We have an ESA Academy that provides training courses that usually were performed until the last year. They were on site in one of the ESA sites in Europe, but recently they have been they adapted to the situation, to the current worldwide situation, and they managed to set up an online courses for students or for professionals as well. They teach teachers on how to use coding, how to code using simple toys like a Lego. There is a Lego set that the kids can use to learn how to code, and from there they can give a new tool to their creativity to create something different, something new. So this is an example on how in the space we are used, also as B were saying, we are used to be very adaptive. So we adapt ourselves to the new challenges, to the new environment, because this is the field itself is like that. We face problem and challenges on a daily basis, and we need to find ways to overcome them or to face them. And this is just an example, and ESA is one of the examples that provides this kind of lectures. And once you have the whole world connected, imagine that how many children, students, teenagers, or young professional could have access to these opportunities to learn something new, to try to understand what they would really like to do in their life, what they want to achieve. I did the same, because in my during my years in my career, I attended several training courses, events, from startup weekends to understand if I had the capability of becoming an entrepreneur, to training courses related to business, to specific technical skills. It's important for everyone to have access to these resources to understand what you really like, what you would like to do in your life. So one point that I believe is the third point. After changing our mindset, creating the infrastructure, the third point is to create the tools. So the companies and the also universities, schools, and everything, they have to start to think of how they want to implement that. So what kind of infrastructure they need, what kind of training their teachers need in order to achieve this worldwide connection and possibility to train and to give the chance also people that live in rural areas, or even say disabled people that cannot physically go on site, to have the chance to study and to learn a new thing. And that's more or less what my experience so far. I wanted to share all of you. Is that I learned in my career that likely I had the chance to travel and get new training, get this kind of training that they guided me in my career to try to understand what I wanted to do. And that's what brought me here. And I really believe that the future is this. We need to be connected all together, to give the chance to everyone to be connected in order to put us, at least from a base level, on the same page. Then it will be the single skills or mindset, the creativity of the person that will look for information, share ideas and everything. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon, for this presentation, showing us how teleworking and e-learning is already here and how Space can support this. Thank you very much. We have 11 minutes left. Our last speaker is Zainab Azim. She is an UNOSA Space for Women Network mentor, as well as the youngest member of Virgin Galactic's Future Astronaut Program, the founder of the Give Foundation, so a young entrepreneur. And I would say we should start ask you some questions from the Q&A. How can businesses, schools, and authorities cultivate a culture of continuous learning? This is for everyone to answer, for Zainab.
All right, yeah, that's a good question. I'll start with school because I'm more experienced with school. I'm still a student in university. I just graduated high school. And in terms of cultivating lifelong learning in schools, it does quite the opposite. And I really, I emphasize Bian's point about not associating schooling with education. They are not equivalent. More so today than ever before, I would say. There was a point in time where maybe they were closer to what education really is, but not anymore. And I think they do quite the opposite. I think I'll outline some ways in which that is done. I think the standardization of education, and I think the treatment of children as standardized people, there's no individuality or uniqueness, and of focusing so much on grades and testing really sucks the creativity and innovation out of kids and makes them have a negative association with what they think is learning. So they don't really like school because when they go to school, it's like you're sitting there all day for 8 hours, listening to someone talk to you. It's not an active process, it's a passive process. You go home, you maybe have a snack, some dinner, and then you start doing your work again. And while the problem is not hard work and that there's a lot of work, it's what that work is for and why we're doing it. It's fine, it's great to work hard and to spend your time working, but there needs to be a purpose behind that, and there needs to be meaning. And when kids do school work, it's kind of like, I need to get this grade so I can graduate, so I can get a degree and go to university, so I can get a good job and have safety and security in my life. That's what it's really for. And that crushes a sense of lifelong learning, because now you've associated learning with stress, with anxiety, with like too much willpower. And there is a way to change that. And I think schools and educators and administrative people and policymakers need to be willing to make those changes, because what's happening in schools is not learning at all. You're passing tests, you're memorizing things, you graduate, you remember literally nothing, to Bian's point again. You don't really graduate with much skills, as we've seen with many companies' testaments. And you go out thinking that this is what learning is, and that's not true at all. That's not what learning is. I can personally say I've learned more outside of school by doing my own personal research, by attending panels like this, by listening, by actively participating, by experiencing, failing, and trying again, than I ever did in school by memorizing something for a test. I'm now in first year university, and I can tell you I don't remember much from my classes, maybe like the few basic concepts, but not, the specifics of the genome or so on and so forth. Like it's so much focused on content rather than skills. Like, how do we learn for life? How do we continue to learn and use critical thinking and not just accept things when we just see them at face value, but how do we question? And just to connect your question to developing countries, I would say lifelong learning, especially in developing nations, is one of the most important skills. And unfortunately, they don't always get the resources to practice lifelong learning. They do, in terms of everyone experiences things, everyone has experiences in life, and sometimes they have the most troubling experiences. But I don't think there's equal access to opportunities for lifelong learning, such as Wi-Fi networks. As Simone, I think you pointed out in your presentation, the access to connection and the access to internet is not widespread. It's much less than we think it is. And so, yeah, I would just say that the way that school is done and how things are taught diminishes this sense of lifelong learning in kids and students, and that needs to change.
Thank you, Zainab. The next question, how do we combine best both on and offline learning? How do we truly personalize education?
So I think there's no better time than right now to think about those changes and implement them, because people are now more open and willing. I think we got comfortable with the way things were, and especially parents weren't willing to change the system. And now they're seeing their kids at home, and teachers and administrators and students themselves are seeing and paying attention to not only the problems in the world, but the problems within the education system. And there has been this movement for a while. And I would say that Ken Robinson, who recently just passed away, he was one of the main people who was speaking about this, who was trying to implement this, who was sharing these stories from these schools where technology and the classroom were combined. And something that Sal Khan says is that when students walk into a classroom with other human beings, they should be able to interact with those human beings. And I think the true power of school, as we're seeing right now in the virtual format, is not going into the class and then listening to the teacher face to face and just copying down the notes. It's the people around you and the social connections and the ability to practice social emotional learning. You don't really get that much else as a student, because school is your main place of social interaction. And so school is key to developing social skills, emotional skills, yet we aren't ever taught about those things in school or able to practice them, because we all have to sit separately and learn separately. And so the way that I think we move forward is that the classroom, instead of being used as a primary source of information and lecture and passive learning, it's a source of active learning, where before class, students at their own pace get to learn whatever it is that they're interested in, but something that they would like to explore deeper. Learn that with the resources that the teacher provides, and whether it's lectures, whether it's using Khan Academy, whether it's videos, whether it's reading, so on and so forth. Then when they come to the classroom, they're not being introduced to the material for the first time. The teacher can maybe go over things and answer any questions, but then the entire use of that class is for collaborative learning and project-based learning, where students can apply what they've learned before coming to that classroom to projects, to create solutions for things within their own communities, to work with other students for peer instruction, to teach other people, to learn from other people, instead of the classroom being used as a time for passive learning, because that's really the only time that you have interaction with so many people that you don't know, that you might know, but people with such diverse backgrounds and diverse identities who have diverse perspectives and ideas. And it's a shame that we waste that. And we say that kids should just sit by themselves in class and write on their piece of paper or their laptops instead of working with the people around them. Because I think that if we, like Bien said again, use the potential of every person, and especially every child, I think we would be able to achieve our SDGs. And we made progress on them, but we haven't achieved our SDGs because we're not using the full potential of everybody. And students and children are also people who have ideas and have potential and can work together to create solutions in their communities. If meaning and purpose and collaboration and creativity are centered. So that's a key way that we combine technology in the classroom, is by using technology for people to self-educate, to guide their learning, to lead their learning. And then when they get to the classroom, that's really about applying their learning and working with others and collaborating and developing those social emotional skills.
Thank you, Zainab. I feel like you should give your teacher some advice on how to use automation and data, and how they could, what advice would you actually give your teacher on how to use automation data to, improve their role as a teacher or lecturer? What advice would you give?
I would say that the role of the teacher needs to change. I think teachers are one of the best parts of school, to be honest with you. I think that they, I also want these changes to happen. They are with students most of the time. It's usually policymakers, administrators, so on and so forth, who have other interests about efficiency versus effectiveness. Because at the end of the day, teachers are experts in education, they're experts in teaching. And I think they recognize that the role of the teacher is not to be this one vessel of information that's spewing things and then kids have to absorb it like a sponge, but rather that they are more like guides who are meant to create environments of learning to happen. That's how I see schools, is that schools are not education themselves, but they should be a place where education and learning can be fostered, and there's a safe psychological environment. And so if we think about school as an industrial process right now, where everything's standardized, where you're doing rote memorization tasks, doing things over and over and over again, and kind of like a robot, without any meaning and purpose, then what we need in terms of not only the role of the teacher, but the structure of school is an organic schooling model. And an organic schooling model really means, like, I'll give an analogy. If the Death, which is another analogy that Ken Robinson uses, the Death Valley, I believe in California, is one of the most hot and driest deserts there is. And, you know, nothing grows there. But what happened one year was there was so much rain, almost like a flood. I don't know why it keeps on muting. There were flowers that bloomed that were all over the desert, which is not something you hear of in a desert. And what they realized was that the seeds were under the ground the entire time, but the conditions were not right for those flowers to grow. And I think that's the same thing with schools and children, is that kids have a lot of potential within them already. They're not blank sheets of paper that need to be filled when they come to school and stuffed with information. But they need to be nurtured, and their individuality needs to be nurtured. Their passions need to be nurtured so that they can flourish, kind of like those flowers, right? The seeds have been planted. And so the role of the teacher then is like a gardener, right? So a gardener does not glue on the leaves of a plant or a flower. They water it, they put the soil, they check on it, they create the conditions, they guide its growth, because the flower will grow by itself, but a gardener can make it more effective and more efficient and better support the plant in growing. And so in terms of the role of the teacher in using data and using technology is, and it's not just on the teachers, because they're very limited right now in what they can do because of standards, because of curriculum, because of testing, and so on and so forth. So this is a policy issue as well. But if those policies were to change, what teachers can really do is personalize education in terms of, you know, allow students to have freedom and autonomy in their learning, guide their learning, and then use technology as a resource for them to learn, to apply their learning, and so on and so forth. And instead of the teacher being the only source of information, allowing kids to research themselves, but giving them the skills to research, right? Because we're in the age of information. And what most people don't know how to do is see which information is valid and which one is not, because it's also the age of misinformation and disinformation. And so we need to be teaching students, especially if we move to the future, so that we don't have such a divided society like we do right now, as we're seeing in many countries, right? Not just the States, and not just Europe and so on and so forth, but there is a lot of division because there's misinformation. And I think that if we teach students skills relating to technology and relating to things that are relevant, that we will not only have a better world, but we will have better individuals and peoples and communities and societies. And so that's what I would say to teachers, is instead of being the sage on the stage, be the guide on the side. You know, they're key players, right? But you're more of a gardener, like a gardener, right? In a garden, instead of being the center of attention in the classroom. The student should be the focus, the child should be the focus, their growth and their learning should be the focus, not rankings, standards, grades, so on and so forth.
Thank you for stressing out that the education should be individualized, not standardized. If creativity is one of the things that identifies us as humans, so what are the characteristics for humanity, and how does education cultivate this creativity? Perhaps that's for B. This is the last question.
Yeah, so education and creativity are key, as Zainab said, and what we're seeing now is that well, it's something that is resurging, even though it was popularized thousands of years ago in ancient India. They had a system called the Gurukul system, and a guru, unlike what we think of a guru in the Western sense, guru does not mean teacher. Gu and ru, the Sanskrit meaning, actually from dark to light, someone taking you from the darkness into the light through knowledge, through guidance. And we have to start being our own gurus and helping us go from the place of unknowing, not knowing, to learning more about ourselves. And creative potential is truly unleashed when we know more about ourselves, and when we can go and be our own gurus and take ourselves from darkness to light. And as I like to say, I'm, being a space nerd, huge Star Wars fan, right? We are all Luke Skywalker or Leia Skywalker. We're all on our hero's journey, right? And teachers are supposed to be the Yodas, right? We cannot force people to do what they don't want. They have to learn in their own time, their own learnings, in their own space and through their own skills. And we serve as someone to help them, lead them from darkness to light. And everyone's fighting their own galactic empire, right? And so that is that journey. And when we can unleash the true potential of education, right? Unleash the true potential of teachers by transforming our education, our schooling system to align with how we actually learn in real life and how education is all around us. That's when we start seeing transformational changes. And if we can empower and enable the system, then we can empower and enable everybody that goes through the system. And that is critical. And we have to know that school education is not one directional. It's not top down. It's not teacher to student. It's not rich country to poor country, north to south. It is omnidirectional, right? And we need to observe and be open to understanding that. And when we can break out of our silos, we can get a broader perspective. And that helps unleash our creativity even more by thinking of new ways of doing things and trying new things. And so it's all interconnected. And the biggest piece of it is understanding that we have the potential to change ourselves. And from that, everything grows. So be your own guru, and one person, and here, one person there, it adds up to billions of people who have the power to change themselves and then change the world.
Thank you. Any more questions, Yara?
Oh, I was wondering, so we have to build on top of skills, not just have technical skills, but around the world, not all of the countries are connected the same way to the internet. And so Dr. Plucker from Johns Hopkins, he's done a lot of research on creativity, and he's writing books about it. And he often talks about that there's a lot of creative individuals, and sometimes it's about having the right advocate. So some people may not have that advocate, have that network. So, with all of our challenges like water security, climate change, things like that, or even public health, so Bien, I believe you've caught malaria 3 times. So, with all of this, what are any suggestions? Because we need economic inclusion, and we have to include also the adults that are becoming homeless from lack of job security. Like in America, we have, an issue with foster children becoming homeless. So any suggestions in that degree with some sort of economic inclusion with all the technology and job market changing so fast?
That's a good question, Yara. I visited, my parents are from Pakistan, so we usually go visit every year, every other year. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we couldn't go, and my last visit, which was a year and a half ago, I got to go to the northern areas, which are known to be a bit more rural and don't have resources that the main cities like Karachi and Lahore have. And it was this little village called Diyar in the Mountains in Peshawar. And there was one school there for girls, and it went up till grade 6. And on the way, when we got there, we were waiting there, an hour had passed and the vice principal hadn't come yet, and we were supposed to meet with her. And then when she finally came, she was profusely apologizing, and we said, no, it's fine. I mean, it was a mountainous region, so we thought maybe it was the mountains. And she proceeded to tell us that she had received a death threat at her door, and so she had to wait for security to come to take her to the school. and had to order extra security to come and stand outside the school because those things, and she said it so normally, and that was what was strange. And I asked her, are you okay? Are you fine? And she said, yeah, this happens almost every week. And so these issues that you're talking about, there is an economic issue. There's also a social issue. There's a resource issue, because when I went there, while the girls are in school, there's no running water. They don't get food, barely get any clothes to wear. And, you know, I visited another school there from the Citizens Foundation, which I was more hopeful for, right? I was, okay, maybe they're not getting death threats because it's in the center region. And I spoke to the girls there, and I also spoke to these women who had been in an adult learning center in a nearby village. And when I spoke to the girls at the Citizens Foundation school, there was this deep disconnect between their experiences, their lived experiences, what they were experiencing in their lives around them. There was a drug problem that was happening. There was poverty issues. There was, you know, climate change is impacting them the most, and especially in developing regions. They didn't have water at home. And then when they came to school, they were expected to focus and think about the material that was being learned. And for some of them, it was a distraction, but for most of them, it just felt very much meaningless. And they wanted to, you know, they were like, this is just a way for me to get out of the country and go to the UK or go to America and find a job opportunity. And then when I spoke to the adult women at the learning center, you know, one of them said that the education that changed my life the most was learning how to read, right? A fundamental skill, because I couldn't read the time on the clock, and therefore I couldn't take my medication, and that was causing me to die. And she had a disease, and so she needed to be able to do that. And what that made me realize was it's the fundamental skills that people are learning in school right now that are needed. And you know, it's always skills over content. And these economic issues that we're seeing is people who are getting this education and so on and so forth and are getting experience are leaving the country and are leaving to what the more developed places or Western places. And these foundation schools, as great of the work that they're doing and, you know, taking them out of poverty, it's very Eurocentric. It's very Eurocentric. It perpetuates this idea, and, you know, that I don't want to say it, how do I say non-controversially, but that the West is better and that that's the place to be, and that we can't do anything in our communities. And also the education system is not even relevant to the issues there or the culture there. The culture is completely taken out from the schools. And then as well, at the same time, they're not learning skills like innovation that they need to create the jobs in their own community. There was a man there with an economics master's degree, and he was working sweeping roads. And we asked him, and he said, well, there's no job here for me to do, and I can't leave the village because I don't have the money. And so when it comes to these economic issues, number one, yes, they need resources to create those jobs. So maybe grants, other more developed countries investing in that if they can, even the governments of those countries investing in education and in opportunities. But at the same time, the education system there does need to be reformed, because the things that they don't even work here, how are they going to work there? They need skills like creativity, innovation, collaboration to build the jobs in that society instead of leaving. And right now they feel like they don't have the resources, they don't have the skills. And so, you know, closing that gap doesn't just come down to throwing money at people and like anyone on the street just throwing money at them. It's about giving them skills and opportunities. And I think education has a key role in that. And space technologies, you know, like satellites have a key role in that, but I don't think that anyone has achieved that right now. I haven't seen it. And that's why like with Give, what we're trying to do is a partnership model, because people in that community know what they need economically, socially, personally. They know what they need in those communities. They know how to solve those problems. They just don't have the resources. They don't have anyone listening to them. They don't have anyone giving them a chance. And so what we don't need is charities going into those countries and building their own schools and saying, here, come in with their own curriculum. They need charities, if they want, or governments working with the people in those communities to develop those systems, to develop those solutions with the kids, with the teachers, with the community leaders, so on and so forth. And that's how it works, right? It's not, let's just all just go in there and solve the problem for them. It's working with people to create those solutions. Yeah, sorry, that was a bit long, but that's how I see the economic kind of the wealth gap kind of decreasing.
Thank you very much, everyone, I know we went a little bit over time. I have hope that you serve these communities in the future. Thank you so much for your time, and stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Jen. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All the best.